All right. So tonight's demo of the Dallas area Woodturners is Donna Frazier. She is a member of Hunt County. Graciously come over and do her first demo with us versus with a home one. So please give her a round of applause. Donna Frazier, please.
Okay, there we go. Okay. Um, so, like he said, I've been turning about 6 years. One of the things when you run into somebody who's a wood turner, you're always interested in what kind of things they turn. And there's a lot of bowl turners out there and spindle turners. And I started out with bowls, and then I kind of moved on to spindles, kind of the backwards route, I suppose. But what makes me kind of unique is I always had a fascination with all the different kinds of tools that are available. There's so many different options. There's different size tools. There's different grinds and angles, and all that fascinated me, and even more so during COVID, because I sat at home watching all these Zooms, and I was watching all these turners, and they were doing all these different techniques, and some of them had similar tools that I had, and some of them had different, and so I kind of dove into a big study of that sort of thing, and so I think it's important for beginners to kind of like stick with one thing at first to become good at it, but keep their mind open to what else is out there, what else is available, what else might work better for whatever it is that they're trying to turn. So tonight we're going to be doing a very complicated project, sort of. Like Kevin was saying, this design of the star came from Theo Harlan-Poe from Australia, and it's really neat because it comes from a 2-inch cube. Actually, his star was 70 millimeter. He was doing this for record power and probably trying to sell some tools. I kind of toned it down to the 2-inch because most people have Novichucks. And the Novichucks come with the 2-inch jaws. You know, they're the 50 millimeter. And so this way you don't have to buy anything new. You can use what you got and not have to keep changing out the jaws. So we're going to make this. The points here are the points on the cube. To turn it, we actually have to make a jig, and it's also 2-inch square, and this is about 5 inches long. But I don't know about you, how many times have I gone and seen a demonstration where somebody's using a cube to make a pointed bowl, you know, with points on it and stuff, and I think, wow, that's really cool. And then I go home, and like I look at my wood and nothing's square, you know? And so I think, well, I guess I can't do that project because I have no idea how to make this square cube. So I think it's important to take a moment and to talk about that. So I don't know if y'all can, yeah, oh, cool, awesome. Okay, so basically my first thought when I decided to do this project is I thought, well, I'm gonna go to Lowe's and see what they got. And they have a hardwood section. And you will find that they have some square pieces of wood. But if you look at the end of the piece of wood, you're lucky if it's one lamentation of 2 pieces of wood together. I went the other day, and I kid you not, there was a piece of wood that was 1.5-inch square, and it was made up of 5 pieces of wood glued together. And that is definitely not going to work for tonight's project because we're going to be turning it on different axes, and we're going to have very fine points at the tips of the star, and that would probably come apart. So we are wood turners, right? So we could cut down a tree, or better yet, recycle. If we see a log on the side of the road, we can repurpose it. So let's say we find a log at our neighbor's, and we pack this home when they're not looking. So you have this log, and we all know that the center log has the pith, and that's what causes problems for us wood turners because the pith dries at a different rate than the outside. And so the first thing we want to do is remove the pith. So usually we'll go ahead and with our chainsaw, we'll go ahead and cut that pith out. And we'll make 2 cuts to just completely remove that pith. Well, it's really kind of cool because after you do that, you end up with the top piece of wood and the bottom piece of wood, and it's already shaped like a bowl if you're a bowl turner. Or you could take that and you could cut it up into spindle work, which we could cut our star from that piece, top or the bottom. But piece that I started out throwing away, thinking that it was waste, was this middle part that we just cut out. This is actually some of the best wood. It's what they call quarter sawn. And so this quarter sawn wood, the growth rings are kind of straight up and down here. So there's very little movement. So you could take this quarter sawn piece, and hopefully when you cut it, the pith out, for our star project, you want to have it a little more than 2 inches there. And you're going to cut that pith out. And so once you do that, you end up where you have 2 pieces of wood. And then you'll probably want to anchor seal the ends and let it sit around a while till it dries. But it should dry pretty good. And when you come back to it, you have your piece here like this. And you want to go ahead and take it to the bandsaw and cut that bark off. And make sure that this piece is, less than 6 inches. Because most joiners only joint 6 inches. So unless you have a bigger one, you'd want to have this smaller than that. So you cut that off, and then what you're going to do on the joiner is you're going to run that rough surface that's from a chainsaw through the joiner to make a nice flat face. And once you have the face, then you can put that up against the fence. Thank you, the fence. And you can run it through the joiner again. And when you do that, you end up with a nice straight edge. And what the joiner does for you is it gives you a nice 90-degree corner here. And now this is safe to take to your table saw. And so you would take this piece to your table saw, and you would go ahead and you put the face down, and then you'd put the edge up against the fence on the table saw, and you'd run this through the table saw, cutting your 2 inches, for tonight's project. And when you do that, you'd end up with this. Okay, you have two pieces here that, that was the face from the joiner and the edge from the joiner, and you now have the edge you cut on the table saw, but you still have this sawn part from the chainsaw you got to remove. So what you're going to do is instead of putting the face down, you're now going to put the edge down on the table saw and put the face up against the fence. You want to keep using the same reference for your cuts. That'll make your cube perfectly cubed, because every machine has a little bit of variance, and so we want to keep using the same reference so that it comes out perfectly cube shaped. And once you do that, then you can go ahead and use your miter sled, and you can cut off your cubes for the star and your longer piece for your jig. So now that we got our piece of wood for the project, we can go ahead and start working on the jig. I'm putting in my safety drive because that's the safest way of turning spindle work, because it doesn't have spurs like the spur drive, where if you get a catch, it's going to scare the bejeebers out of you. This will just kind of have it spin. And speaking of safety, that's when I would start thinking, okay, I need to tie my hair back, proper dust protection for your lungs, and making sure I have my face shield, and that sort of thing. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this piece on for making the jig. This is going to bump. Yeah, let's tip it there. There we go. That'll work. That's okay. It's the jig. Okay. This is maple. I actually got it up in New Hampshire quite a few years back ago. I think that's on center. I found center. Yeah, there we go. And then what I had done is I had actually put poke in it with the awl, and so then I know exactly where it is when I'm lining it up here. Okay. So one of the things I just have to say that's kind of funny is just how low this lathe is. It's funny, there's all these different schools of thoughts on lathe height. I know that like Ellsworth, he talks about having it 3 inches below the elbow, which I guess because he sat on his lathe, I don't know. Like when he was doing his hollowing, But Stuart Batty always says 3 inches above, and that's kind of what I have mine. And then there's people who say to have it elbow height. So you can imagine if my lathe is 3 inches higher, how much higher that is. Okay, so the first thing we want to do in making our jig is we want to have a tenon on this end so we can put it in the chuck. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use my 40-40 gouge to do this because I can do it in one cut. The tool rest, you know, if you had it horizontal to go ahead and make this tenon, there's kind of 2 things wrong with that. One is if you don't have the flute completely closed and upright, when you enter, it's very easy, you know, if it's slanted, you know, the tip of your tool, to hit the wood and drag it over to the side. So that's one reason. The second reason is if this was a large piece of wood, spindle, I mean, because you can have large spindles too, and you're trying to make a tenon, you're going to have even more overhang on your tool. So I like to put my tool rest this way when I'm making my tenon, like that. And, wow, that looks weird. Okay, so we're going to make a tenon. Oh, that's higher. Oh, this is backwards. The plus is the less speed, and the minus is the more speed. That's interesting. Okay, cool. So the Nova chuck, I don't know if you look carefully at them, most Nova jaws are dovetailed on the outside and the inside, except for the 50 millimeter. It's actually straight. So I've made a straight tenon for the Nova chuck. Now we're going to go ahead and grip it by the jaws, and tailstock. So, woo. There. Okay. Go ahead and stick this in. Yeah. Okay, and we're gonna slip it in here. I like finding jaw number 1 because it's always good to, oh, that was my demonstrating piece, I guess, yeah. We'll stick with the one. I don't want to cook and show or a magic act. We're gonna actually make this whole thing tonight in front of you. Okay. I thought it was back. Yeah, back. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and have the jaw actually on the corner because it makes more location with the face that way. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up. And I'm going to tighten it from the other side too because you always get a little bit more when you do that. Okay. So the next step in making our jig is we're going to be drilling a hole here, and this hole is going to be so that the tailstock goes into it. And this tailstock here, it measures 3/4 of an inch thick, so I'm going to be using a 3/4 of an inch Forstner bit, and it measures 1 inch long, so that's how deep I'm going to drill the hole. But before I drill the hole, I want to make sure that this is a very flush, straight surface. I mean, it's been cut on the table saw, but I want to make sure that this makes good contact with the back of my live center. And so I'm actually, you know, flat or even like just very slightly concave will make sure it makes good contact with that. So I'm going to go ahead and take another cut here. Whoops, grab my gouge. Okay. There. All right, and safety. Oh, wow. Okay, is the lathe off now? Because I noticed the light went off. Yeah. Oh, click it. Oh, it's on. Oh, this, I pushed that instead of this. Gotcha. Why are they next to each other? Okay, here we go.
User error.
Yes, I've never turned on a Laguna before. Okay, so get that spinning. Okay, and maybe light where I can see what I'm doing, maybe. Okay, so I'm actually watching that ghost line. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the tailstock, live center, to kind of give me a little divot for starting the Forstner bit. So it's always good to have that location for the Forstner bit. So once again, this is a 3/4 inch Forstner bit, and I have the tape on it measuring 1 inch deep. So we'll put that there. And then we want to turn the speed down for drilling about 500, which is about there, I guess. Keeps varying, something like that. Okay. And when you're drilling, you want to make sure that you retract it every so often to make sure the wood chips don't get stuck. And I think we're almost there. Okay. Now the great thing about this, before you go removing your Jacob's chuck, go ahead and check it and see if it's deep enough. Otherwise you're going to do a bunch of flopping back and forth if it's not deep enough. So that looks like that's making good contact there, so that's good. Okay. I'm going to take that out and take this out of the chuck. And this is where we have to actually mark our jig. And I don't know, maybe people will see better if I sit it on this surface, perhaps. There we go. I guess I don't need my face shield anymore. Okay, so I have a center finding ruler, and these things are really cool because you kind of balance the measurements on both sides, and it makes it really quick for finding center. And this doesn't have to be, you know, exact really, but thereabouts. So that's about like that. So I'm going to mark middle, and I'm going to mark 1 inch to each side. And I suppose I don't have to mark the bottom, but I kind of do, so it makes sure that I put my right angle ruler on there straight. So now I'm going to go ahead and use this to mark my lines. So there's one, and the one in the middle, and the one over here. And then you got to follow this all the way around. And if you got it right, they will meet on the other side. If you got it wrong, it'll be kind of skewed off to the side or something like that, which is not good because this is very precision. I mean, it's like Kevin said, it's amazing. If you're off just a little bit, by golly, your star is going to know it. Usually when you're turning on the lathe, you know, you don't have kind of this kind of precision, but this kind of really is. So, not bad. Uh-huh.
I want to get this away from your foot so you
Oh,
don't get it out of his leg.
that's smart.
I want to pin it to the sleeve here.
Okay.
Clamp it back there.
Awesome. Thank you. It's like a little bit Yankee, though. Yeah, maybe it's a little. It's like, maybe it's a smidge. Maybe I'll look this way while you attach it. Yeah. There we go. Yes, you can make them different sizes, though. That's a good question. Like I said, Theo, when he did his demonstration, he had a 70 millimeter, which I was saying was close to 2. I think Kevin corrected me. It's 2 7/8. Okay. And the center of his star with the Forstner bit was 1.25 inches, I believe. And this one here, like I said, it's a 2-inch square with the 1-inch Forstner center. And I've also, the one, if you read the newsletter with the Mary and Joseph with the star above, that star was actually a 1.5 inch, and I used a 3/4 as the center of the star.
Do you find that one size is easier to make than another?
The smaller you get, the precision becomes more important. Yeah. So now I'm going to find center of the width and go ahead and mark that. So that's here. And I'm going to flip 180 degrees and find center on the other side and mark it. Okay, and then I'm going to take the awl and I'm going to put a mark. So right where it's like halfway on the width and halfway on the length. And so that's right here. So there's one, and then on the other side here. Like I said, it has to be right, or you will know it. Okay. Then you take your compass. I have the world's tiniest compass. And you can put it right in there, that little poke that you made. And you want to have it extend out to, your pencil line, to the corners, and connect the corners. So, actually, there we go. So there's one side. And the other. And you do the same on this side. And you want this to kind of be dark. That's why I'm going back and forth, because you're going to be watching that ghost line when you turn it. And so you have to have something to see. Wow. It's really having a hard time drawing here. There we go. Okay. So now, if I was at home and I only had one chuck, I would go ahead and remove 2 of the jaws, but I'm going to save you that, and I brought a second Nova chuck here. Is that just locked there, or maybe? That worked. Oh, there's a button. Cool. That'll be handy. Thanks.
You can actually screw it in.
Oh, okay, thank you. Hopefully I don't spill that. So I'll stick this one on. So it has 2 jaws now. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that live center here to figure out where this goes. Because when we put this in here, otherwise we don't, here, you'll see. Is it going bigger? I'm going in instead of out. Backwards. There we go. We don't know whether it goes out here or in here. We got to use that center mark to figure out where to tighten the jaws. So, yeah, oops. It was sliding. So I go ahead and poke that in because we're going to be drilling here, and that gives a nice location, again, for the Forstner bit. And then go ahead and tighten it. Okay. There. Okay. So, like I said, the center of the star is going to be 2 inches, so I have to change out the bit. Right now it has the 3/4 an inch, which is what we had used for the tailstock hole. There. And what we're going to do is we're going to drill halfway through, because what we're going to be doing here is we are going to be making straight cuts into halfway. So we're going to drill halfway, and then we're going to cut, and then we'll be turning it around drilling through, which is halfway, and then make the other cuts. So we'll move this up here. Lock it. It's 1 inch. Yeah. And I already have it marked halfway, which this is 2-inch cube, which is 1 inch. So it's a 1-inch Forstner bit going in 1 inch. No, it's funny. It's optical illusion, like in terms of it looks like you scooped it out, but it's perfectly straight cuts, like Kevin was saying. Yeah, straight cuts. I mean, you can see it. Yeah. Yeah, it's the center. So I guess maybe to explain a little better, when we start making the star, it's going to be between centers, and this is going to be the first axes that we turn it on, between centers. And then after that, this has to fit into that. So we're going to part this in half. Okay? Yeah.
Why did you choose 3/4 for the first Forstner?
Because my tailstock, if you measure how thick it is, yeah, it's 3/4 of an inch. Yeah, that's a good question, though. Yeah. Okay, so since I'm drilling, probably should have my face shield on. And we're going to make sure the speed's low. Maybe not that low. Like I said, about 500 or so, give or take. That's a little more, but it should be okay. And we're going to go ahead and drill. Is this? Yeah, it's locked in. And make sure, like I said, to retract it every now and then. And we're pretty close. Looks like about there.
So 1 inch or half the diameter or half the thickness of the blank.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. Right. Yeah, that would be about right.
3 inch, you go in 1.5.
Yeah. That seems about right. I mean, you can probably play with this and see, I don't know. Okay.
Why not go all the way through, though?
Because we need to have it halfway. And if we just started cutting with our bowl gouge, we really wouldn't know where halfway was. So that's why we drill halfway.
That's one of the mistakes I've made. Don't do it.
Okay. Before I start cutting, though, we're going to go back to the drawing board here and explain a couple things. So wood turners, when we're turning, there are 3 different ways that we make entry into the wood. So I'm going to write entry, and this is right. Oh, it is right up. That's cool. Okay, entry. So the first way that we make entry is a supported entry. Okay, a supported entry is what you start out on and then you continue to do if you're a spindle turner. You have a piece between centers, you have your bowl roughing gouge, you do the ABCs, you anchor on the tool rest, you rub the bevel, and you make a cut. So in a supported entry, you rub the bevel and then the cutting edge starts cutting. So it's, I guess I'll write to the side. You have bevel and then cut, okay? The second one, way we make entry is what's called a direct entry. And a direct entry is like when you're making a cove. So your tip of your gouge actually enters the wood, and then it establishes the bevel in which you can open your flute more and continue your cut. So in a direct entry, it's the opposite. It's where you have your cutting edge enter first. Wow, my handwriting. Then bevel. Okay. The third way that we cut, and we're going to have a lot of that tonight, is a floating entry. And on a floating entry, it's very similar to the direct entry in which the cutting edge contacts the wood first, but there isn't exactly a solid bevel because you have an interrupted cut. So it's like wood, air, wood, air, wood. And so your bevel's kind of doing bevel, air, yeah. And so if you have the speed going pretty good on your lathe and you're pushing pretty hard against it, you'll get bumpy ride. But worse than that is if you happen to have the speed a little slower, you might get in between the wood spinning, and then you're going to have a nasty catch. So this one is a little trickier. You have to be softer on that bevel, just a very light cut, or light rubbing of it. So this is a floating bevel. So going back to what we're about to do here now, we're going to, it's kind of bowl turning. I mean, it looks complicated, but this is bowl turning. We have the side grain, facing the tailstock. And it's kind of like we're making a bowl, except for a bowl usually has a curved nature to it. And we already have the bottom already done for us with the Forstner bit. So what we're actually doing is making a straight cut, and we're leaving that flat bottom. And so when it starts out, we have solid wood. So it's like the direct entry, because there's solid wood. But then we get out towards the edge of this circle here, because we're cutting this circle area here that we drew with the compass. Then you're going to have that floating bevel. So here we go. I've talked the talk. Now I have to walk the walk, I guess. All right. So safety. And we'll turn it on. And I might get that actually tailstock out of my way. And bring the speed up. Okay. So, like I said, on the direct entry, you want to have the tip of your gouge straight up and down. Because if you have it slanted, the outer edge is going to catch that spinning wood, and it's going to drag it, and you're going to get a skid. So you have to have the flute perfectly closed. That's, like this. And you also want the bevel pointing in the direction we're wanting to go. So here we go. So I made entry to the wood. Now that I've got an established bevel, I can open the gouge and cut. So it's into the wood, open the gouge, and cut. Now when you're making these cuts, I don't know if there's any way of you seeing, but the distance that I have left to cut to the bottom, I want to keep that distance kind of the same as what I have left to cut in terms of that circle. So I'm kind of taking the same amount of wood the entire pass through. And so I don't end up with any concave or lumps, because it's supposed to stay straight for your jig. Okay, so now I'm getting into the floating area here, and it's the same way. I just make contact with the wood and open my bevel and cut. But I have to be a little bit lighter on it. It's like my pressure's more down into the tool rest with my left hand, and now I'm back into solid wood here. Okay. This is really hard to see what I'm doing. Does this bend forward? Yeah, it does. It's just tricky. There we go. That's much better. Yeah. No, it's fine right there. And I don't know, oh yeah, you can kind of see, sort of, ish. Too much light. Maybe like that. Yeah. Does that work? Yeah, okay. Okay, so here we are. We're going to go ahead and get to the edge here. And we're going to go straight in. And I'm aiming for the bottom. We'll see. I'm taking kind of a hefty cut.
Okay. So hopefully that was straight. Oh yeah, check that out. I don't know if you can see it, but it's straight. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and turn it around, and we're going to try that again. So once again, I'm going to have my you're not supposed to lay that on the bed too. That's I guess a wood turning no-no, especially if you're wearing sandals, which you're not supposed to be wearing when wood turning anyway. I'm going to use that live center to tell me where to put this in the chuck.
Donna, could you drill all the way through at that point after you got
Yes.
the cut?
Yeah. I first started doing this where I would drill up until it cracked, and then I had my tweezers in there getting that last little bit out, and it doesn't matter. It just flops into the back of the chuck, and it's not even a problem. So yeah, you just drill all the way through. Get this up here. So figure out where this goes. Looks like right about there. So I'm going to tighten that and lock it into here. And a little bit on this side too. Okay. And once again, we're back to drilling. And it's already set up for us. Oops. With the Forstner bit in the Jacobs chuck. So, just like that. And turn our speed down because we were just turning a minute ago. And now we're drilling. And here we go. And when you get towards where it's going to break through, I don't know if you actually hear the sound sitting out there, but it kind of changes sound. And then you kind of hear this tiny little crack where it pops off. And then we pull this back out. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing we did before, and we're going to go ahead and cut in here. But before we cut in here, I thought, like this demo, to me, it's just a lot of straight cuts. And to me, it's a cool demo, but you know, it gets kind of boring because you're kind of making the same cut over and over. So I thought I would kind of use some different tools and kind of give you an idea of options and stuff. Especially with SWAT coming up, because if you go to SWAT, you're going to see all kinds of tools available there. And you're going to see gouges that are different sizes. I mean, they go from like 1/4 inch all the way up to, you know, 3/4 of an inch in thickness. You're going to see, you know, different angles on the tools. You're going to see different flute shapes. Some gouges will have wings forward and wings swept back and that sort of thing. And so there's all these different options. So how do you know what tool you want to use? I kind of came up with a couple ideas that might get you started thinking about that. So here we go. Is that centered? Oh, cool. Okay. So what tool? Okay, so the first thing might be, if you're a beginner, because I started out a beginner, we all do, is it might just be what you have. You know, you don't have a lot of tools, so it's what you got. And I turn all kinds of things with a 5/8 bowl gouge. I mean, it's amazing how skillful you can get with a 5/8 bowl gouge. I mean, this was actually a 40/40 5/8 to boot. So, like I said, it could be what you have and that you're comfortable with or have skill with. The other thing is depending upon what you're turning, like what orientation is it? Are you doing bowl turning or are you doing spindle turning? So orientation. N-O-R. I'm thinking I spelled it wrong, but you get it. The other thing is, what are you turning? I mean, is it a large item or a small item? So you want to consider, your tool overhang. Because if you're turning like a massive column, a big spindle, you might want to have a larger spindle gouge. I mean, you could turn it with a bowl gouge too, but this is actually a 5/8 spindle gouge. I mean, they do make them large. You certainly wouldn't want to be turning a large column with a tiny, dainty spindle gouge. It's kind of the same thing for bowl turning. If you're doing some delicate beads or something on the face of a bowl, you probably want something smaller than a giant bowl gouge. They come smaller too. This here is I think it's a 1/4-inch bowl gouge. So that's something to consider. The other thing you might want to consider is like detail work. Once again, it kind of falls in the same thing. You want to have, overhang. I just talked about detail. Overhang. If you're going to be off over the tool rest, you want a thicker tool, less vibration, I guess is what I was going to say with that. Then also your tool handle. So the handle you might want to consider. You might want a small handle if you're doing some small spindle work, and then like a larger handle if you're doing something larger. But more than that, you want to be comfortable with the tool that you're using. So if you're somebody of large stature and you have kind of a bigger midsection, you might want a handle, that is going to be comfortable, and an angle to your gouge that's going to be comfortable. So that's something to consider. And I think, too, is just, you might want to just keep it exciting. I mean, some of y'all who's been turning for a long time, you might want to just put some excitement back into your wood turning and try a different gouge and just see how it goes. So you might do that for excitement. So some things to think about.
We have some members that only use carbide. Can you make this with carbide?
That is a very good question. That is one thing I don't have experience with is carbide.
So I'm wondering, just because it's a straight cut, you're just pushing it in.
Over there. Sorry.
Yeah, you're just pushing it. So
right. Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know if anybody's used carbide on an interrupted cut, but I would think might work the same. Yeah, okay, it does. Okay. Yeah. So yeah. It would be exciting, wouldn't it? So I guess, like I said, to keep things exciting, I have here a swept back grind that is 55 degrees instead of the 40 degrees with the wings. So same thing with this gouge. You want to have the angle going in. So the handle is more over here than it was with the 40-40. But it's the same thing. We're going to make contact with the flute closed, and then we're going to slowly open up the cut. Okay, yeah, maybe a little faster. I'm getting used to the speed here on this thing. Okay, so flute closed and opening up the cut. That's a big cut. Okay, so now I'm starting to get into the little bit into the floating the bevel. Now, here's something I'm going to stop and say, is if you have a 55-degree gouge, which is a lot of what the clubs use, I know Hunt County uses it a lot, it doesn't want to go forward like a 40-degree gouge. So what you kind of have to do sometimes, I know like in turning bowls, a lot of people start doing pull cuts. In spindle turning, you almost have to use your thumb to kind of help it along. You're not really pushing it with your thumb, you're still controlling it with your right hand, but you're helping it along. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. I don't know if anybody caught on to that. But that's one of those things, when you're watching people do demonstrations, there's a lot of subtle things happening that you can start watching for. So this gouge here, too, this is interesting. This is not ground on a Varigrind jig. This is a continuous bevel. Gouges that are ground on a jig with one pivot point, the tip angle is different than the wing angle. And if you were to open it up in the other direction too much, you're going to get a really nasty catch. But this is a continuous bevel, so I kind of wanted to show you this because it's, like I said, the options that are out there. I'm going to enter, like I said, with the gouge closed, into this floating area here. And I'm going to open it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it around, and I'm going to go straight in. Now, they say you can't do that, but you can, because I just did. Everybody says that the tip slices and the wing peels. That's the tip peeling and the wing slicing. So there's, like I said, lots of options out there. So, yeah. So I'm going in here, and I'm going to try this one more time. Get it around. Oops. There, and I went to the center. Now, let's see if that's straight. And we got it nice and straight. So that's one way, with this continuous bevel, like I said, you couldn't do it with a regular Wolverine ground jig. But with this continuous bevel, and I'll talk more about that. I'm supposed to be, if I survive tonight, doing a demo in January where I'll talk more about these grinds and things. But that's one way of having your handle in the direction of your cut, because it's really hard, if my handle's here, I'm pushing off into space unless I have my other hand helping me. So like I said, there's lots of options out there, and like I said, for me, it's just to keep it exciting. But if you were doing production work, it would probably be more than that. I mean, you'd really want to find the tool that makes it faster for you. Let's see here.
How did you find the bottom when you drilled all the way through? I'm
Back here.
Oh, how did I?
When you
Because one side was already hollowed, and so you could see that
so when they
thickness.
come together?
You could see that thickness, yeah, as you come together. Yeah, good question. Okay, so how does this locky thing work? I don't know. Maybe I'll just. Really?
Go ahead, I got it.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Well, maybe. Is it weird? Oh, I have to push that button. Is that it? Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right. There we go. That's another thing about these Nova chucks is they come with this little ball thing on the end, and I don't know what the purpose of that is, but if you chop that off, it seems to work a lot better. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put the regular chuck back in, or if you were at home, what you'd be doing is adding your jaws back onto it. And we are going to go ahead and put this back into the chuck. And I did all that talk about chuck jaw number 1 and never marked it, but that's okay. Maybe y'all remember that when you try this. So we're going to go ahead and tighten it from both sides here. And this step here, I am. So Kevin was talking about before this demo, he's like, how in the world are you going to part this? And usually what you would do is take it to the bandsaw and cut it, but I'm going to go ahead and do it on lathe. We already have our center line here. It's between centers. It ain't going anywhere. So you might have a lot of tear out, but it's a jig. I mean, you're not going to be showing people this. So you can kind of do whatever. Okay, so I want my tailstock loose. I mean, it's just there, but it's loose. That way the kerf isn't going to close on me. And I'm going to take my parting tool here. And I think I actually raised my tool rest too high. There we go. And I'm going to part it. Now, this is an interrupted cut. So usually when you're parting, you turn your speed down. But I kind of have to have some speed because this is an interrupted cut. So you just take it nice and easy, and, well, you'll just see. So, let's see. I have it, I'm shooting for like about, I don't know, this is like a little under 1,000. 865 is what it says, but it looks about right. Okay, and I can see that line, it's like a shadow. So I'm aiming for it. So here we go. Now if you cut this out on your bandsaw, you're actually going to have to make a couple cuts because you want kind of about a, I guess this is a 1/8 inch parting tool. You want about an 1/8 inch gap, and I think a bandsaw blade is less than that. So you'll probably cut to each side of the line. Like I said, just take it slow. You can hear the sound changing. We're almost there. There we are.
So Donna, will that matter if the shark is wider or narrower than an 8?
Well, it's when you put your star in here, you don't want the jaws to be, or the jig to be touching, so you want a little gap in there. Yeah. So I brought some sandpaper to kind of pretty it up for y'all. It doesn't really have to be pretty, but just knock off some of those fuzzies. And I just kind of do that a little bit too. And we'll do that to the side. Yeah. Yes, you can reuse this jig, and you can make a bunch of stars with it. The one thing is that when you use it the first time, it like you're cutting into the jig at a certain point, and so when you use it again, there isn't quite as much support for the fibers. So if you were like using a very chippy wood, you might want to make a jig every time. For this maple, you can keep reusing it, and it does pretty good. The key, I would say, is just when you're getting close to your finished cut, just make it nice and light because the fibers are less likely to tear than if you were taking a huge, gigantic cut. So we now have our jig made, so we're going to sit this aside. And let's see, we're on the walkie thing again. Well, maybe. Wow, it does not pick me. No, I'm not sure really how that works. Oh, you rotate it. Oh, rotate that. Okay. I don't know. I guess so. Okay. So set this aside, and we're now going to work on the first axes of our star. And I know y'all are thinking, oh my gosh, this demo is going to go forever, but really and truly, this star part goes pretty quickly. Okay, so we're back between centers. You always want to clean this out. You don't want any dirt in there that's going to scratch the inside. So stick your finger in or get a little toothbrush or something like that. So I went ahead and marked center on this cube, and I went ahead and dotted it with a marker so that I could see it better, because sometimes it's really hard to see. So the grain orientation is wrong on that piece. Very good. Did I mark all these wrong? Wow. That stinks. Yeah, I guess so, but I don't think I brought that. Wow. Well, you want to cut the end grain first, Always something. You want to cut the end grain first because there's more resistance with the end grain. So, there's a lot of meat here. You want to go ahead and cut that first. Now, this is the part that Kevin was talking about. He's like, how do you cut the end grain? Well, the thing about cutting the end grain is, I got thinking about it. I'm like, this is bowl orientation. I was like, it's kind of like a smack upside the head. So if you think about this being a bowl spinning here, it's same as if you're bowl turning in a sense, that you're 40-40 gouge, that's peeling, it's at an angle with the wings, that it's peeling into the side grain, and you're cutting across the end grain, but you're not cutting into the end grain, you're cutting across it. And yes, you're going in the wrong direction because you're supposed to go in the direction of supported fibers. You're going downhill instead of uphill, but as long as you have a sharp gouge, you're cutting across those fibers, not into them. So it's not as dangerous as it would sound. I don't know if I stand any chance of finding center, but I'm going to go ahead and try. And then what I'll do is I'll switch to one of the other ones after this, because everything has to be like perfect on this. And I'm likely not to find center. We'll know soon, though. Okay, I'm going corner to corner because this is a square, so it should maybe be square. Did I do that? Okay, and flip this side. No, that's not it. It slipped on me. There we go. And this way. There, I guess that's it. Okay, I'm going to poke it with the owl, which... Sure, yeah. I had an owl here just a second ago. That's weird. Oh, here it is. Okay. So, like I said, I just marked it on the side grain here because I had it marked on the wrong side to have the end grain facing me, but that's what we need. Okay, there we go. Okay, so into the side grain and into the side grain. So this looks like spindle turning, but it's actually bowl turning. Whoa. It's hard to see that. There we go. I think that, maybe it. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to start off with the 40-40 gouge. And yeah, there's no spindle lock, so we're good. And this is kind of an example of how you can turn something small with such a large gouge. If I was stranded on an island, as people say, always ask in wood turning, what tool would you have? I would have a 5/8 bowl gouge. So that's what I'm going to turn this with. Before I turn this, we have to know where we're going with this cut. It has to fit in that jig, right? We drilled the Forstner bit hole of 1 inch. So I'm skipping the step of finding out how deep we're making these V's. So we're going to go ahead and mark with the center finding jig the center here. Okay. And I'm going to draw a line here. And hopefully it's a heavy enough line I can see when it's spinning. And we're going to go ahead and part in. Now the first part of this is an interrupted cut. And so that's what I'm going to do up until I hit solid wood, and then we'll stop and talk about it. I'm going to cut a little bit on each side of the line to kind of keep the kerf open. You don't want it binding in there and everything, so. And you just kind of take light cuts And I don't like how close my tool rest is. Okay, here we go. Maybe my light again. There. See what I'm doing. So you're watching that ghost line. And as you get in here, when the ghost line disappears, you know you're in solid wood. But you kind of know you're in solid wood anyways because the cut feels different. Right there, see, I'm starting to get long streams. And they say you can't peel end grain, but that kind of looks like a peel to me. So here we are, we're in solid wood. And wow, I am like surprisingly somewhat accurate because you can see how I'm in just a little bit here. I'm in just a little bit here, in just a little bit here. Maybe not quite as in, but this is pretty close. I mean, we could continue with this piece, and I think it would still make a pretty good star. If you find that when you enter the solid wood that you're really in on this side and you just started to touch the solid wood on this side, just start over because it has to be accurate in order to get your points. So now that we're in solid wood, we're going to go ahead and measure to that 1 inch, but we're not actually going to 1 inch. This is actually, I need to kind of explain something. Okay, so, wow, that's cool. Okay, so you have your block that's going to be your star, and we know we want the center of the star to be 1 inch, okay? And we're going to be making these V cuts on both sides coming in. We're going to kind of make this an hourglass shape to be held by our jig. We're going to take this parting tool in, and my parting tool is 1/8. And so I'm going to bring that parting tool in to about 1/8 of my 1 inch mark of center. That way, when I do these cuts from the side, if I have them come down to both sides of my parting, then it's simply, I just connect them, and I'm at my 1 inch. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. So, now this, I got to test this one out. So I say this is like the game of Operation, where you will know if you touch the side. How many of y'all know the kids' game Operation? My kids said you wouldn't even know what it was. Okay, you do. So I'm going to get my parting tool in on the tool rest, and I'm going to go ahead and put it in so it's kind of rubbing the wood. And then I'm going to have my calipers, and I'm going to get them in. And it's light touch with the calipers and straight in with the parting tool. Ah. And there we are, red center. Okay. So now we can make our V's. Okay, so like I said, I have the Stuart Batty 40-degree gouge with the 40-degree wings, so I have to watch my wings so they don't hit. So I'm going to take a cut from this side and a cut from this side and keep working my way down. The wing, see, bowl gouges do two things. They slice and they peel. Because of that, I have to make sure that my wing is at a nice peeling angle. If, while I'm making the cut, I tend to close my gouge any, then it's going to start scraping. So I have to keep it, at that 45-degree angle so I get that peel off the wing. But there is kind of, when you're peeling, an upward arc in as you're going. So here we go.
Donna, that your parting tool, when you were going with the parting tool and your calipers, that caliper was set at 1 1/8, correct?
Yes, 1 1/8. That's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to use a different grip on the gouge. I'm going to take my pointer finger around the tool rest, and just like when I was bowl turning and I had both of my fingers, on the gouge, It's the same way, except for I have my pointer finger resting here to give a little more control, because I don't want to, go jabbing into it is the point. That's funny, I was about to say that. Okay, so here we go. And this light is so weird. Well, hopefully y'all, okay. So it's like direct entry. Now, actually, this is something I should mention here, okay? This is a direct entry with the tip, but it's a floating the bevel. Before, when we were cutting out the inside of the jig, we were floating the bevel on the outside. But that interrupted cut wasn't coming towards us. It was spinning this way, okay? So you could still have a skid if you didn't have your flute closed. We have the interrupted cut coming towards us now. And when the interrupted cut is coming towards you, there is no skid. So I can go ahead and have my flute opened when I make this entry because it's not going to skid. So like I said, I'm one of those people that like to keep it exciting, I guess. So I was practicing for this demo, and my husband walked in. He's like, "What the heck are you doing?" Because I was playing with the skew, and I was also playing with the French badan. And the skew, I got through the second axis before it exploded, and the badan, I only ever got through the first axis. But you could, if you were really good, you could do this. Yes, that's good. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so like I said, I already have my flute open the direction I want it for a peel, and I can just go straight in. And the goal is to kind of take an even cut on the way down. And I have to close it at the end so I don't hit the other side. And go ahead and take this one. And like a bowl turner, I have it too slow. It's bowl orientation, but we can have it faster. It's a lot smaller than a bowl. So, there we go. And I have a little bit of cove going on there, but we'll fix that in a minute. I'm kind of laughing at my hunch stance. This feels so weird. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try to fix that cove and get it more straight. And I'm just going to go ahead and go for the edge. So I have my flute kind of lined up with the direction I want to go. And I'm just going to go for it. My thumb is pushing the tool down on the tool rest. The forward motion is coming from my handle. And I almost made it. Okay, and now we're going to do this side. And so you can actually feel the bevel there, you know, and then just kind of back it up from that, keeping that same position with your handle. Or flute, I should say. And I'm watching the top. I'm not really watching where the gouge is going as much, well, maybe at the bottom here so I don't overshoot it. But I'm watching the top as to what's happening when I'm turning so I can adjust. So we'll go ahead and stop this and have a look. So I've got my points here perfectly, and here it looks like just a little bit more, you know, and we'll be there. And then, of course, we have to connect the lines. And it's looking fairly straight. there might be a little bit of a hump on this side, but I'm about to take more from this side anyways. So you're kind of watching this. This is kind of the most important part of this project because it has to fit in the jig, of course, but more than that, whatever you part this down to, you got to follow through on the next two axes because you want your centers here to make really good, I think we passed the one around, but you want them to, on the tray, okay. You want them to match, whatever diameter you go down to on this side, you want to go down to on this side so you get a nice crisp center intersection. Some of these on my practice, you can probably find where I went further on one than the other and stuff, and that will show. So you want to be really particular about this one. So here we are, and I close the flute at the end. And so then now this side, I'm going to probably pick up the cut here, it looks like. And quickly close the flute. And kind of fix that little... I don't know if you've ever watched Mark Soleil, I think you pronounce his name. He talks about that little fray thing as being a wizard. So let's see. Pretty good. I don't think we fixed that corner here. But let's see how it's fitting in the jig first. So let's see, here it is. So it's fitting really good on this side, but like see how it's just a little bit kicked on this side? That's because I don't have it to the point here. Can you?
And we have the overhead camera.
Okay, so it's fitting really good here on this side, but it's a little kicked out here, and that's because I don't really have it cut to the point. So I just need to catch that point a little bit more. So here we go. Like I said, you can kind of rub that bevel a little bit to know where you're at and just kind of back up to catch it. Be really light on that bevel. So this is like a really light, delicate cut down to the bottom. So let's see how this fits. There. That's better. I think we can live with that. So I kind of have a little ridge there. I don't like that. I don't know what side that's on, but we'll fix it first. It's bugging me. I think there, maybe. I think I got rid of it. Yeah, it's smoother. Okay. Take this out, and we're going to go ahead and put our chuck back on with our jig. So wow, there we go. Okay. It's back. Oh. The joys of being tall, right? Yeah, you'd probably be stepping on a step stool for my lathe, right? Something. Oh, that's right, you did. Yeah. Okay, so this, yeah, it's coming together. It just wasn't fitting. There we go. Okay.
So do you mark the jig so that you journal up the same way as it came off the wood, not 180 out?
Yes, that is, I kept talking about that, and then I never did mark that, did I? I guess now would be a good time to mark that, huh? Thanks. So twice now I said John number 1, didn't I? And then I still haven't ever marked it. So I usually mark the one on both sides of that, corner. So that probably been good to do. So when you tighten this, it makes kind of a crunching sound because it's wood against wood, but that's okay. It's solid in there. We're going to go ahead and mark center again. Now, this is a big one. You're marking center of your star. If you reuse this jig, you could look at this and say, oh, this is center here, but it's going to be cut weird after you start reusing it. And if you go by that, you're going to end up with a lopsided star. One side's going to have longer points, and the other side's going to have smaller points. So always mark based off the star. So here we are finding 1 inch off the star. And like I said, I like marking the top and the bottom because then I can draw a line between the two. And make it fairly dark so you can see it. Now we're going to part in, but we can't measure because this is an interrupted cut now. And those calipers would get stuck in that and go flying. So we're just going to kind of eyeball it, what we think is our 1 1/8. And well, you might be able to, yeah. That could work. So here we go. And I'm going to keep that kerf opened up by going a little bit each time. And we're almost there. I'm thinking that might be it. So I'm going to stop and look at it. And that looks pretty good. So, like I said, actually, to keep this light and lively, we're going to use a spindle gouge now. And so it works like a bowl gouge, except for you have to take smaller cuts. And but it's you can do it just as efficiently. So, whoops. You tip engages, you open the flute, and you go down. So engage the tip, open the flute, and go down. And I'm getting this really lopsided, so let's see if I can straighten that out. There. And then I'll do this side. Okay, and one more on this side, I think. And I'm going to stop the lathe and we're going to look at it. Okay. Yes. So at this point, I can see where this is a little bit crooked, but we'll see how it turns out. But I have more to take on this side, but basically you want to get it where you have the 1/8 in the middle and the 1/8 on each corner, and then you can kind of merge it together. So And like I said, I'm watching the top, really. And then we'll go this side. Ah, yeah, that wizard. Oh my goodness. There we go. Oh, he's still there. Let's have a look. Might have to do more adjusting. So we got the tips really good on this side, and on this side it's fairly decent. So I kind of like it, and it looks fairly straight. Maybe a little bit of a dip here on this side. That's probably the problem with the bottom. So I'm going to take a little bit here and pick up that cut and straighten it. There. Okay. Yeah. So now we're going to go for our third axis. And go ahead and stick it in this direction. It looks like this. Yeah. So, there we go. Get it lined up in here. I know. It's crazy. Okay. Oh, I put it back in the same direction. My goodness. Oh my goodness gracious. Okay. Get this back in here, right? Okay. So there we go. I think I marked the 1-1 wrong, but it's going in better this way. Ah, lock it. Okay, tighten it. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and turn this axis. There. We need to mark our centers. So, like I said, we're marking the actual star, not the jig. And draw that line. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and part that. Now you have to be really careful on this side because there's even more of an interrupted cut. And if you go moving your parting tool crazy, you are going to get one heck of a catch. So we're just nibbling it down. And I think that's probably pretty close. We'll stop and look. Yeah. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and cut our corners again. So we're going in, we're opening the flute, and raising the handle. So in, open the flute, raise the handle. Okay, I'm gonna do this side. Have I put anybody to sleep yet? I hope not. Okay, so I'm gonna go out here. Oops. Gotta make this nice and straight. And go into center. And then this side, rub that bevel so you kind of know where you're at.
It's all over but the crying.
I hope not.
This is where I blow it up.
Oh. I should not be so picky about the center, right? I finished it. I was teasing. Yeah, so that's it's at the center. And that's our star.
Voila!
So thank you.
Very good.
Oh, yeah, this star. There you go. Thanks.